opportunities to develop its attacking construction. And probably that's why in the later game, Vichy Anand refrained from b7, b5, and tried to use this slightly different framework. As we know, knight is on b3, not on d4, to present another typical idea that we already saw in a different situation. The idea to take over this key square on e5. So you can guess. He followed the footsteps of Argentinian players. He played h6, bishop h4, and now g5. Same idea. Probably it's a good example for you to learn that even if the pieces are located differently, and sometimes you should pay attention to the fact that the minor change could in the position of the pieces could dramatically change the evaluation of the position, and you will have to reconsider your plans. There are still some key ideas that are always in place. You probably remember the game Spassky-Petrosian, where Petrosian took over e5 square and protected knight with h6 g5 concept. We already looked at the Argentinians' failed attempt, but h6 g5 is one of the key ideas for black to break through white's position in the center, and in fact by occupying e5 square to prevent any immediate breakthrough. So knight on e5 guarantees that no rook on e1 will ever pose a real threat to black king on e8. So knight on e5 will block this advance. So Peter, after g5, didn't want to take on g5. Black simply goes knight e5, and then knight goes on g4. That should be fine. And we could just look at a few more moves. He played bishop f2, gf4, queen takes f4, b5, king b1, b4. So Vichy didn't miss this chance to push the knight. Knight e2, bishop b7, and then black knight came on e5, and black won very convincingly. I don't want to be very categorical. White position was not bad at all, and obviously there are a number of moments that I could point out, but I will not do it, where white game could be improved. But it just shows that after knight b3, black has number of options, number of ideas, namely two, b5 with ideas of b4, or h6 g5, where white initiative can be met with very effective countermeasures. So knight b3 could be recommended if you want to avoid very sharp lines. If you don't want to employ your computer at a very early stage of the game, you should look at knight b3. But even by playing knight b3, you remember that at one point you have to take some decisive actions, because black position in the center is very solid, and to break it through you have to be extremely creative. Gradual development of the game in Najdorf Sicilian normally benefits black because of the solid position in the center and potential chances to have a counterplay on the c-file. And very often, as you saw, white's advance in the center creates weaknesses, and black takes control of the center, gathers his pieces together, and could have a very, very solid positional game. So knight b3 is just line to be investigated, more to be said, and I'm sure we'll see the line more often in the big tournaments, because lines with queen d2 are getting too exhausted. Also, just briefly, I could mention a few other lines. Of course, it's not only about queen d2 and knight b3. White tried to play queen d3 in this position. Without going much into details, I'll tell you that pawn on b2 can be taken, rook b1, queen a3, and there is very little difference, but even if there is any difference, it's not in white's favor. And one of the games I played nearly 20 years ago against John Nunn, and the line after f5, bishop e7, bishop e2, knight c6, take on e6, take on e6, take on c6, e5, similar, d takes e5, bishop f6, g6, bishop f5, h5 check, king f8. You could see that queen on d2 would be far more dangerous for black because it could appear on h6. Now, Nan had to remove the queen on d2, but it was too late. My king went on g7, rook actually went on g8, and king found a very good refuge on h8. So there were a number of attempts to improve white's game, but queen d3 didn't win hearts and minds of very strong professional players. And one more attempt not to sacrifice a pawn. It's a move that Jan Timman played a couple of times. a3, now taking on b2 is impossible because of knight a4, and queen on b2 is trapped. And after knight c6, white had to go back on b3, bishop e7, queen goes either on f3 or on d2, short castle, long castle, and we have situation which looks more like Rouser. It's a different ball game. It's a different story. It's not the subject of our discussion today, but it's another interesting position. Black had no reason to complain. Also, white had pretty easy game. You play with white on the king side, g4, maybe bishop takes f6, g5, and with black you play b5, rook b8, b4. So, who plays better? He wins. Probably that's it. I would like to talk more and more about this line queen b6. I guess that studying this line, you can also study the history of chess, the development of the chess ideas, this kind of study is very close to my heart now, because writing the book My Great Predecessors, I always tried to figure out how different generations improved our understanding of the game of chess. And the line of queen b6, which is 50 years old, it's a half a century. Maybe we can even celebrate it now, because the first game in the database is David Bronstein in 1954, shows how chess has changed since those days, since 1954, since 1950s, where Botvinnik was still a world champion, and Bronstein, Smyslov, Tal challenged him with different success. Today, we have new names, we have new strong players, but the line queen b6 is still quite popular. It's still popular because it offers equally good opportunities for both for black and white. And as long as Najdorf is around, we'll see plenty of queen b6 at board. Black will play queen b6 and will be waiting for white. For queen d2, offering poison pawn, or knight b3, protecting this pawn and slightly postponing or the inevitable conflict. Inevitable because Najdorf is conflict between two minds, two personalities, two strong players or two weak players. It's a conflict by definition. Thanks.